Hi Russell and welcome back to my channel. In today's video I wanted to talk about if you grade short fantasy reads. I myself am getting back into this genre. I've made a bit of a break and I've struggled with getting into big epic fantasy series in general, and I've been trying to find my way back into the genre and love it just as much as I loved it in the past. So if you, like I, struggle with a short attention span and want to find a very satisfying fantasy book that is under 300 pages and you can read in a day or in one sitting, stick with this video. I have a few great options. The first book that I want to recommend is Nettle and Bone by Kingfisher. I'm a big fan of Kingfisher apparently now because I've read 2 of her books and I am obsessed. Both of these are going to be on the list. Kingfisher is perfection if you love fairy tales gone wrong. If you're into grittier, grimier, darker fairy tales, if you love fairy tales conventions and storytelling elements, but you also like your things to be a bit more nuanced and definitely transgressive if it comes to adaptations or books inspired by. Nettle and Bone is not based on a particular fairy tale, but it does use fairy tale storytelling conventions. It follows a woman named Mara who is the 3rd daughter, the 3rd princess of her kingdom. Because she's the youngest, she has some leeway and doesn't have to be a part of strategical marriage alliances. Unlike her sisters, her oldest sister is married to a prince of a different kingdom, so their kingdom would be protected. They are not particularly known for military prowess, and her oldest sister dies very quickly after the marriage. The 2nd sister is married immediately to the same man and she struggles with fertility. She gives the prince a daughter that doesn't live for very long and also dies. The family meets each other again at the funeral and Mara's sister tells her that her husband is not treating her well. She's being abused and she's afraid that when she's going to give her husband an heir, he's going to murder her. And then she's not going to give her husband an heir, he's going to kill her regardless and go for Mara, the 3rd daughter. So it's a lose-lose situation and Mara doesn't know what to do. She wants to help her sister escape, but she understands that if she's going to do that, their kingdom is going to fall as a consequence to her actions. So Mara decides to go find a Grey Witch and hopefully resolve the situation with magical means. I loved the world building. I loved the descriptions of all the mystical magical creatures. This book is what Guillermo del Toro would call a fairy tale. I hope it makes sense. I really love this. It was especially cool to see a 30-year-old woman as a fantasy protagonist. The 2nd fantasy novella from Kingfisher that I highly recommend is Thornhedge. This one is actually a reimagining of the Sleeping Beauty with some fae lore thrown in, and I really love this one as well. It is a story about Toadling, who is a human that was stolen by fairy and who was raised in the fairyland. She was asked to bestow a blessing on a fae that was left in her place in the human world, and she fucks it up, essentially cursing this child to become evil, and has to figure out a way to curb this child's nature by putting a sleeping spell on her. So it's a Sleeping Beauty, but in this story the Sleeping Beauty is the villain. It was such an interesting twist on the fairy tale, and I loved how in this novella in particular Kingfisher commented on this idea of beautiful things being good and ugly things being bad, and how it's not really true. The story maintains the fairy tale atmosphere, but at the same time talks about modern issues and concepts. That's what I like about her stuff in general, at least the stuff that I've read so far. The next one is Galatea by Madeline Miller. It's a very short fantasy story. If you love Madeline Miller's work, you've read Circe and you've read The Song of Achilles, and you have not read this, read it. Obviously, it's a retelling of the myth of Galatea and 𝕊𝕆𝕀𝕸𝕃. I would not say that it's particularly different from the actual myth, but it does look at the situation from Galatea's point of view. It actually isn't trying to make her into the villain. The villain here is clearly 𝕊𝕆𝕀𝕸𝕃, as it is in the myth. You can actually figure out how people treat women by how they interpret that myth. It's one of those interesting medias that allow you stealthily to understand where you stand with a specific person. Madeline Miller's is not an original take in my opinion, but she's a good craftswoman and I enjoy her art, so I really enjoyed this story as well. If you're into mild horror and body horror specifically, I would recommend Yellow Jessamine by Starling. It is a fantasy, but it's also a horror. This one is about a woman named Evelyn who is a rich merchant who's also a master of plants and poisons. She lives in a country that is militarily blockaded, and her ships are the ones that are getting by to bring produce and all kinds of things into the kingdom. Tragically, one of the crews fall ill and bring a very mysterious sickness into the city that is manifesting in intense obsessive behavior and then catatonic stupor, and somehow this sickness is also connected to her because the people that fall ill start looking for her. The strongest parts of the story are the imagery and the atmosphere, so if you're looking for these kinds of things in your fantasy, I think you're going to enjoy it. But also remember, body horror. If you enjoy urban fantasy, a good mystery, a good adventure, I would recommend Even Though I Knew the End by C.L. Polk. This is a really fun deal with the devil type of story, and it follows a magical detective that struck a deal with a demon and whose time is getting to an end. But before her soul is taken, she wants to make sure that her girlfriend is gonna be set for life, that she's not going to need for anything after she dies. She decides to take on her last case that promises to be very fruitful and goes on a hunt for a white city vampire that has been brutally murdering people. The story has everything. The atmosphere is top-notch, the mystery is intriguing, the characters are genuinely interesting people. I also really love the romantic line between the protagonist and her girlfriend. I really enjoyed the story, but I do like this trope. I do like deal with the demon tropes because of how much tension they bring to the book. There's intrigue, there's magic, there's romance, the world building is very cool. It's very Prohibition era type of urban fantasy, and I have not read a lot of those, so that felt very fresh and fun for me. The last on my list is Thread of Angels by Rebecca Roanhorse, and this one reminded me a lot of the Daughter of Smoke and Bone trilogy. There's something similar about them. I think it's the world building and the idea of this society of monsters existing. Thread of Angels is set in a fictional world of 𝕊𝕍𝕋 that is populated by angels and fallen angels. These are two different species. It follows two sisters, Celeste and Mariel. Celeste, despite her background, was brought up with her father in the privileged elect society, and Mariel was left with their mom in the slums of Galatea. So there is an inherent conflict in their relationship. At the start of the story, Mariel is accused of murdering a virtue. A virtue is a type of angel, an archangel, and they are the elite species in that society. So she is apprehended and someone has to represent her in court. Celeste decides that she's going to do it because no one else wants to and no one cares cares about her sister the way that she does. She also decides to conduct an investigation of her own because, once again, no one wants to. This society was so interesting to read about, and I love the general atmosphere of the story, but what bought me over is that in the center of it is a relationship between these two sisters, and it could have been set in any other world, in our world. I really like the characters and the twists, and if you miss 𝕊𝕆𝕀𝔸𝕃 Smoke and Bone and want something similar, I do recommend to pick it up. So these are all the fantasy novellas that I'm going to recommend in this video. If you have any for me, you can leave them in the comments down below. If you reach this part of the video, leave the emoji of a stack of books, because why not? And on this note, I will see you soon with another video, but until then, bye.